Well, good morning, wherever you're at. I'm Jason Miller, founder and CEO of BitLyft Cybersecurity, and I have with me today Leia. Leia, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Leia Kupris Shilobod. I'm with CompliancyIT, and we are a BitLift partner for very good reasons. And we have an MSP outside of Pittsburgh. We serve companies across the entire United States, and we specialize in helping organizations with CMMC compliance.
Awesome. So we're going to dive into that CMMC compliance and what it really means today. Leia and I she is a princess at the CMMC space. She has been to a lot of conferences and she's read the book on CMMC. And it's always amazing, when you find somebody that cuddles up with CMMC compliance and governance and a cup of coffee and reads it from end to end. And so we have this opportunity to hear from Leia today exactly what is going on in the space and what it means. So without further ado, let's kind of jump into it. Leia, if you can, kind of tell me a little bit why CMMC compliance is so critical today.
So CMMC compliance is just one of the critical compliance and regulations that we have right now. There are many, and they're going to continue to roll out. All of our regulations are in cybersecurity are only going to continue to get more rigorous. I know that with the current climate, with this new administration, people are thinking, like he's talking about rolling back regulation. Not in cybersecurity. That's full steam ahead in all areas, particularly with CMMC compliance that is specifically with government information, federal information from the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense, like all government organizations, doesn't really make a lot of things. It's private industry that really makes stuff.
Exactly.
And so if the government's going to give this sensitive information out into the commercial space, they want to make sure that it's protected, whether it's just the federal contract information itself or whether it's controlled and classified information. So this is critically important so that we can continue to secure our nation. We have our secrets being, our adversaries are continuously getting access to that, sometimes actually directly from our government, but oftentimes through the commercial supply chain.
Yeah. You mentioned something, controlled unclassified information, CUI. You want to kind of double click on that for us and just explain what that is for our audience?
Sure. So I guess it's helpful to understand it a little bit more on a spectrum. So you have federal contract information, which is the information in the federal contract itself. It's not intended for public release, and you do have to protect it, but not in a super rigorous way. Then you have, if you're going to go to the other end of the spectrum, you've got information from the government that might be classified. So very, very, very sensitive. You need security clearances. They get very, very long list of things in order to access it, store it, process it, etc. And then somewhere in the middle is a classification called controlled unclassified information. So it's been declassified, but it's still controlled, which means that there are security protections that are required in order to process, store, and transmit that information. And there are different flavors of CUI, CUI. So there's just basic CUI where you've got, just 110 controls and 320 objectives to protect. Just
100.
And then you have other flavors of CUI that have additional protections, such as, no foreign persons may have access to this. There's a little bit, little different layers before you end up getting into the different classification of classified.
The information, right? I always think it's interesting because we've talked with several C3 PAOs. I always have trouble saying that because I have to say it in my head first before I say it out loud. But we love our acronyms, right? And mixing them up. As we talk to the auditors and the folks in the space that are helping come alongside of readiness assessments and things like that. If you could share with people, if you could share with people that are either listening to this, what are some of the most common, say, misconceptions about CMMC, and that, what are businesses getting wrong today? and then maybe like, what are they getting right? So I know there's like three questions in there, but
Yeah.
misconceptions, what are they getting wrong and what are they getting right?
Okay, so there are a lot of misconceptions with CMMC. I think that there is on one end, there's a misconception that it's unattainable. On the other end, there's a misconception that it's really easy. I've seen both misconceptions.
Really easy, huh?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I have, I have some technical people. They look at the control set, the 110, they'll look at 800-171 and they'll be like, huh, that's easy. I can do that. And
Yeah.
then that makes me realize, okay, so you don't actually completely understand what's required. In CMMC, you actually need to look not just at the regular 800-171 doc, but you need to look at the A, 171A. And then
Yep.
that will have all of the assessment objectives. So here's the control statement. Here are all the things underneath of it, clarifying what it means in order for you to fully meet this control. And if there's one of them in there that you don't meet, you fail the whole control. And
Wow.
yeah, to this day, there are still a lot of people that don't understand that. So it is a lot more in depth and rigorous in that way. And I would say that's a huge misconception. Another misconception is that when you need CMMC at level 2, which just requires the 110 controls, as opposed to level 1, there's only 15 there, that you immediately need to be in Microsoft's GCC High platform. And that's not always necessarily the case. You don't always need to be in that platform. It's an excellent solution, but it's not always required. It definitely depends on your business process and your data flow.
So that's a great note, right? There's a wide gap between 15 controls at level 1 and 110 controls at level 2. And then it sounds like to me that there's caveats where GCC High is in play for your business based on process and data flow. And then there's maybe areas where you might be an exception to the rule, to the standard, if you will, and you might not have to be in GCC High. But obviously, that is going to take some sitting down, some understanding, some discussion in order to make that decision, if I hear you correctly.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Where are some areas that you think people are getting it right, maybe getting it wrong?
Where I think people get it wrong is that they don't realize that CMMC is a program that you're instituting in your organization. It is a compliance program. When I talk to manufacturing clients, and everyone that I work with has a safety program, they have a quality program. They know that, that they don't just, create some documents, do a training once, and they're like, we're safe.
Yeah.
Everything's safe here,
Yeah.
or, like just implement a quality system and they're like, we've got quality. And they recognize there's a process that you continuously follow. There's a program they have in place to maintain quality over time, to maintain safety over time. So when I tell them that CMMC is a program like those, they're like, okay, I get it. Not that they're thrilled that they have to have another program, but they get that. It is not a checklist. It is not, we've done all the things and now we're compliant and we can just sit back and be compliant. And that is where I see a lot of people getting it wrong, like because you have activities you have to continuously do over time on a cadence. Some organizations where they get it right, a lot of organizations already have the rigor for things like physical security, making sure their facilities are secure. So that's usually pretty easy for them. They already have some training in place, so we can just add a little bit more training to what they already have. And then, of course, there's the organizations who we get to work with who really take it very seriously. I love to work with those companies because they show up and they're like, look, we don't know exactly how to make this work, but we want you to lead the way, show us how to do this, implement it so that we can get it right and keep it right because we really care about this. This business is important to us and we want to make sure we're protecting the government's information. I love working with those organizations.
Yeah. We often say, and we cherish those clients as well that say, listen, we want to get it right. We don't want to be right.
Right.
Like those are team members that say, listen, I don't know it all. And I'm not a subject matter expert in this area, but we aspire to be the best that we can be and achieve these goals together. You're right. Those clients are amazing to work with. You really appreciate those ones. And I hope for both of us, we continue to work with those like-minded individuals going forward.
Agreed.
You've said a lot there, and I'm just trying to think about where to kind of take the conversation so that we can sort of unpack some of this stuff carefully in the time that we have today, and people can have some takeaways. But you sort of we've touched on this, getting it right, getting it wrong, and the misconceptions. But as you think back in your subject matter expertise so far in this space, what are some of the biggest hurdles organizations face when working towards CMMC compliance?
Okay.
It's a good one, I know.
Like because there can be a lot.
Yeah,
One hurdle is, just trying to figure out their data flow, right? Like what do I have that is actually CUI? They can usually figure out what the federal contract information is pretty easily, but what is the CUI? How am I going to identify it in my organization? And then how is it actually flowing throughout the organization? Because if you don't know what it is, how are you going to figure out if it's being protected? So that's been a challenge at times. Also, tool selection, because there are a variety of, okay, let me back up a moment to give a little bit of framework. There are three kinds of types of controls you can utilize in order to meet these security requirements. You can use an administrative control, which can be a policy, a procedure that's written, a plan that's in place, or even training. You can utilize physical controls, cameras, locks, keys, security systems, all that kind of thing. And then you can use technical controls. So that can be in a configuration on a system, like a box that you check that makes things more secure, or a fully tunneled VPN, for instance, instead of a split tunneled VPN, or utilizing or utilizing tool sets that are going to meet some of those requirements, like your tool set, for instance, that does meet some of those requirements. So sometimes selecting those tools can be very challenging. For a long time, we had confusion around what tools are going to be suitable. There were some people on the talking heads on LinkedIn saying, oh, all these tools are going to, like these security tools, they're going to all need to be FedRAMP. And I'm like, I would seriously doubt that the federal government is going to make every DIB contractor use FedRAMP tools. The price is one thing, but the selection, like the marketplace is not ready for that.
right.
And then,
There's like less than 5 on the list.
yes. And so that would be problematic. Providing that clarity at the 11th hour as they're trying to launch this program. I don't think that they were going to do that from a, attainability perspective. And then they had mentioned about a year ago, they mentioned a new acronym for us. Yay. SPD, Security Protection Data. And then they didn't give us a lot of clarity back then about, well, what is SPD and how are we supposed to protect it? So luckily, with the final rule, they clarified that what security protection data is. It's going to be log files. So in other words, all the information that your tools would be collecting, vulnerability data, configuration data, passwords, and all of that information must be protected with the 110 controls. So, but it's not CUI. So it doesn't have the same requirement as CUI.
Good call out. Good call out. So yeah, when you're walking through this, you're obviously going through in your mind, or even in your spreadsheet, if you will, the differences of what is CUI and what's not, and then what falls into the 110 controls and what is SPD. I love that they finally defined what we are and what SPD is,
Mm-hmm.
and that it is part of the 110 controls for level 2. We were sort of wondering that for a while. As we talked about that, right? I mean, I'm thinking to myself, gosh, isn't there like about 100,000 plus, DoD manufacturers out in the United States that have to be CMMC level 2?
So the varies across industry. A lot of them are manufacturers. There's also engineers, laboratories. There are IT companies, like information security companies. There's lots of contractors. I had heard a number of about 100,000 that require CMMC at level 2 with the 110 controls. Obviously, a lot more that just have federal contract information. I think that as the prime contractors get a better handle on their entire supply chain, that we'll get a better number. That's kind of the estimate that we're working with, because primes are ultimately responsible for their entire supply chain. So it doesn't matter how many tiers deep you are, that prime is still responsible ultimately that you are compliant. So, and actually, interesting. This number blew my mind. I was talking to somebody at a large prime who told me that just one of their contracts, in totality, it had 2,400 subs at each level. Like if you counted them all up, yeah. I was like, holy crap! How do you even keep track of that?
Yeah, that is some software. It's got to help you keep track of that. And I mean, that's no longer just a simple spreadsheet anymore, right?
No, not a spreadsheet anymore.
So I feel like maybe what we're talking about here is if you think about like how can businesses sort of move beyond, just a checkbox approach, when they're implementing real security improvements. What are some of the things that you share with your clients?
Let me see, back in 2017, I started to have clients come to me and say, hey, can you help me with the NIST thing? And I was like, I don't know, what's the NIST thing? And then they showed me 100-171, and I took a look at it, and I'm like, well, looks like a lot of tech stuff in here. Sure, we can help you out with the NIST thing. And then that was the beginning of this, of drinking from the fire hose for the last, oh my goodness, how many years is it now? 8 years?
Yeah.
Yeah. So at first, we were taking kind of a checklist approach to that, right? Like, are we doing these things? But then I realized really quickly that if we have a bunch of clients that have this requirement, and it's not just the technical stuff, it's documentation too. Documentation I have to maintain for them, documentation that they need, policies, plans, and their own procedures. If I don't have a very strategic and structured way of approaching this, that they're going to end up failing this requirement. They could be in trouble with their contracts or even lose them. And what are they going to do? They're going to look at me and they're going to say, what the hell, Leia? Like, I thought you had this taken care of. So recognizing that, I decided that I needed a programmatic approach. So I ended up, what culminated in the CMMC IT documentation toolkit, which was, looking at the functional level of all the things that we're doing from day to day, aligning those things to the controls, creating plans on top of them so that we have that collaboration with your client so that we can maintain those things over time, doing those compliance checks, and then your overarching policies. And then we have a cadence of meetings. We usually meet about quarterly where everyone does those compliance checks, make sure all the things that are supposed to happen daily, weekly, and monthly have been happening, that point of accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And then anything we find out of alignment, because if you're doing that compliance check, you're probably going to find something out of alignment. Tech environments change all the time. You've got all these different hands in there. You have sometimes people even the client makes a request that sometimes will take the environment out of alignment. So if you're doing all that, you're just radically truthful and transparent, and you bring it all together at the meeting, and then you get to realign it. And for those of us that are technical, then you'll appreciate this response when I tell you this. So, because what would happen to us, I noticed over time, I've owned my MSP since 2006. So we would go into an environment, they'd have this old server, we'd do fresh network, fresh server, everything's beautiful, fresh Active Directory. And then year 5 comes along and everything, it's like, what happened? Like, it was beautiful 5 years ago, and now it's a big freaking mess. And then you kind of start over again. You can't do that with CMMC. It has to stay beautiful. So by implementing this specific cadence of activities that we do, we're consistently realigning, and you catch all those things so that every quarter you're back to like aligned and beautiful. And this IT girl, like, there have been times where I got like tears in my eyes because of the beauty of being able to continuously keep these environments aligned. I'm like, it works.
Yeah. It is amazing to see, like, when you do have the focus, the dedication towards it, you're following the program, that you're right, that the laundry doesn't build up, right?
Yes.
The dirty laundry doesn't build up, and then all of a sudden one day you've got to spend like a whole week, doing the dirty laundry. And I completely agree with you that that's why we're using some of the tools that we're using as part of our program, right? It's not just simply to check a box, but they are tools that help us along the way so that every day, 365 days a year, IT folks come in and do IT things, changes occur, but still help you maintain and keep your CMMC compliance. And you shouldn't lose it along the way, right? And I think so many organizations sort of lose sight of it throughout the year sometimes if you don't have a good structured program put in place.
Yeah, and the thing is that you can't because every year you have to log back into the SPRS, the SPEARS portal, and attest that you've done all the things, that you're doing the
Yeah,
things that are in your policy, that you're following your own procedures, that your environment is still aligned and you're still at 110. You're making an attestation that you're doing it. And if you're not, then you are making a false claim, and then that's got its own ball of wax.
repercussions, like you said, loss of contract, maybe even potential lawsuit. I've even heard that there's deeper teeth than that. Like you could potentially even be, beyond lawsuit. You could have other things happen to you.
Yeah, and then if you are like lower man on the totem pole, but you're still responsible for this in some capacity, I mean, that could also be, your job if someone's looking for a scapegoat.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing to think about this, but there is a bright side to things. And so as you sort of touched on this, and I want to kind of double click on this, is selfishly, and you guys are seeing this as well, from your angle, what role does managed detection and response play in strengthening that compliance efforts?
But that's a really great question because if you look at the controls, they don't say anything about managed detection and response. They don't even say the word SIM, right? They don't say that at all. They tell you that you have to collect, have to take logs and determine where you're going to collect logs from. How often are you going to review those logs? You have to scan for vulnerabilities. How often are you going to do that? Right now, it just kind of leaves it open. I mean, we refer to those things as organizationally defined parameters or ODPs. So you could say that technically, you could say, I'm only going to run a vulnerability scan once a quarter and look at it once a quarter. If that's in your policy, that could potentially be it. Now, is that a good practice? No. If we really have the government's information, if we have to report directly to DoD anytime that there is an incident on the system, and then they come in and do an investigation on your incident and find out that, yeah, we're collecting audit logs, but we're only really reviewing them maybe once a month. They're going to be like, well, you're supposed to have our data. You're going to look at your audit logs once a month. Like, do you have staff that has the capacity to be able to do it? Do you have staff that has a skill set that can actually do those things? Now, I have really, really smart people on my team. And
Same.
you've worked with some of them,
Yeah, yeah.
So they're really smart, but it doesn't make sense for us to build that in-house capacity. And also, I'm not interested in bearing that risk at the moment. I transfer that risk to you, Jason.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean that's why we are solely doing, managed detection and response, log collection, analyzation, 24/7, we use both software systems, people. You have to use it all. Because the moment you rely 100% just on software, that could leave you, hanging with a problem. And, you can't 100% rely on humans either because humans make mistakes. We all do.
Yes.
If you're a human and you haven't made a mistake, I'd love to meet you. But especially when you have millions of logs flowing in from all these systems per client, it takes software, AI, it takes algorithms, it takes all of it to help you sift through, detect, and that type of thing. And you also bring up another good point, which is like where we get into recommending things with clients that you're right. Scanning for vulnerabilities once a quarter is no longer acceptable in this day and age. because vulnerability notifications, right, are coming out weekly. And so you're finding out about CVEs being posted on a weekly basis. If your scanning schedule isn't for another maybe 8 weeks or 10 weeks or 11 weeks away, and then you knew the whole time that you could be susceptible, right? What we actually even recommend to our clients is at least a once a month, if not a biweekly scan of the environment. And people are like, wow, that's a lot. Well, hang on a second. We're just talking about the scan for a moment.
Right.
We're not talking about actually implementing the actual patch management yet. That's our next conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You do need to tighten those two things up and get the time period shorter.
Yes.
Simply because there is so much software today that is being consumed by customers, clients, DoD manufacturers, and other verticals within inside of the CMMC space. And then if you're not patching those within, like, say, 2 to 4 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks, I think, is an acceptable time frame in this day and age. If you're doing it sooner, great, applaud you. But a lot of IT organizations have so much going on and their plate is so full that doing vulnerability patch management is every 2 to 4 weeks, I think is. What do you think?
So an organization has to determine what is reasonable for them, and they have to put it in writing, and then they have to make sure that they follow whatever's in writing. So if you put that you're going to immediately respond to vulnerability alerts and you're going to immediately patch it, you're probably not going to be able to do that. Don't put it in writing, because an assessor will say, okay, so you say you do this, show me, and you don't do it, and then you're going to be failing that control. But what is reasonable for your organization? If you are an MSP, then you probably have somebody in your organization that's responsible for receiving that information, assessing what clients are affected by this particular vulnerability, what is the plan, and then scheduling that with the client. What's reasonable? If you're internal IT, then what's reasonable for you? For goodness sake, like, block it in your calendar. Whatever it is you decide to do, like, this is my day every week, every 2 weeks, that I'm going to check this. And then if I find anything, based on the severity of the vulnerability, what action do I take and how fast do I take it? And does my management and leadership understand the importance of me taking this action? Because sometimes patching vulnerabilities is going to, cause business interruption.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important from compliance as well as from security perspectives.
Yeah, it could mean, not getting the next contract if you fail that control.
It could mean your business goes down because you didn't patch something in time and a malicious actor leveraged that vulnerability and, set off a bomb inside of your organization. Leverage that to deploy a Bitcoin miner that replicates itself across everything. I mean, there are so many things
Yeah,
you're leaving your organization. But that's why it's called
vulnerable too.
vulnerable. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. On a live stream I just did a couple of weeks ago, we talked about XMRig and how XMRig is essentially, at its core foundation, it's this open source software to be deployed and do Bitcoin mining. And at the same time, it can carry out other functions behind the scenes, data scraping, data exfiltration, deploy ransomware, and all of this type of stuff. And so people think, oh, it's just a Bitcoin miner. Whether I get to it today or tomorrow, no big deal. It's just, sucking up some RAM and CPU utilization. And so it's not really costing me anything. It's very well could be costing you something, and you might not know it. You don't know what that criminal end game is for you with that in there. So I love that you pointed that out and brought that up, because we've seen it many times where people ask us, like, why are we so concerned about this? Well, here's why we're so concerned about it.
One of my friends had a Bitcoin miner, and it was an automated attack. But once it got foothold, it self-replicated and spread everywhere. And every time they tried to kill it, it would took like so many hours, a whole team of people, a couple of days to just get it under control because of the way that it was, like, the scripting to just self-replicate all over the place. That was just a Bitcoin miner. But still, I mean, the cost associated with the help, the downtime, having to go back to the client and explain that this, you're an MSP and you got compromised even though there was no data stolen. I mean, still that's very embarrassing and can really
100%.
hurt relationships.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was thinking about this and so like why is compliance, not a one-time achievement, but more of an ongoing process? And you were kind of touching on this before, but maybe you could kind of just expand out a little bit more.
So compliance is not a checklist and you're done. Compliance is something you need to maintain over time. It would sometimes, I talk to clients and they were like, well, when are we going to get compliant? When are we going to be compliant? When are we going to be compliant? And I can say, well, when you come and get an assessment, that C3PAO is going to assess your compliance at that particular moment in time. But the regulation states that that is maintained continuously. Like it's not like that. That is the check. That is the point of accountability that you've done what you said that you did. But if you look at the controls themselves, the fact that you need to attest that you are still compliant, the fact that you have to maintain your system security plan continuously, the idea is continuous compliance. It's not one and done. So if you don't have a plan for that, if you don't have a program in place, it's something that is very important to your organization, but it's not urgent. It's not like every single week there isn't, somebody knocking at your door from the Department of Defense saying, are you still compliant? Are you still compliant? That's on you. And if you don't have a structure in place, then you're going to keep deferring it because fires, right? Operations, problems, critical things. And then, a year goes by, and you're like, oh crap, I have to, log back into SPRS and validate my score. I haven't done anything all year. I don't know if I'm compliant. I was compliant. Maybe I put 110 there. Or maybe you scramble and try to do your yearly security assessment. Try to update your SSP. Try to update your risk register. Neither one of those things is going to lead you to a good outcome where you get to keep your contracts.
Yeah. You bring that up, and one of the thoughts just came to my mind is what are the risks of treating compliance as a one and done effort? What if you are that person and you're listening to this? What is the risk that you're running?
If you treat compliance like one and done, then you will quickly fall out of compliance as soon as you have attained compliance. And then you will be in breach of your contractual relationships. That's it. And then what happens when you're in breach of contract? I don't know, read your contracts and they will tell you. As far as the federal government is concerned, if you sign an agreement that you are going to comply with a clause, right now, DFAR 7012 is in all contracts where they have CUI. And then soon, DFAR 7021, the CMMC clause will start to appear in contracts. So if you signed saying, I will do this, and you don't do it, that is a false claim. Your customer, if it's not the Department of Defense, your customer can come back on you. They can stop allowing you to perform on the contract until you've completely realigned your organization. I have seen this, by the way. I have seen stop work because they hadn't met some steps along the way in implementing. And, as time goes on and we really have the teeth in this, then people are going to lose contracts that they've been awarded. Nobody wants that. Like, I'm not saying that for FUD. Like, no one wants it. Primes do not want to pull contracts from their subs. They need their subs in order to deliver on this, right? The government knows how important the supply chain is in order to get their end product. Nobody wants to pull contracts. We just want everyone to be compliant so that we can all continue to operate. The government can get what they want. We can get the money from our contracts. Like, that's what we want, but that requires everybody seeing this as a continuous effort.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good. I completely agree with you. Like, we are not out here trying to spread FUD. What we are really out here trying to do is educate people and showcasing like this is achievable. There's organizations out here like BitLyft and like CompliancyIT and other organizations that are trying to help DoD manufacturers and others across the DoD CMMC space
Yes.
to achieve its mission.
Yes.
One is we don't want foreign adversaries getting a hold of the information that would cause our nation to be less secure, right? And so we need to, every day we wake up, we need to be thinking about that, and we need to make sure that everybody from the C levels all the way down to the IT people are taking that to heart.
Mhm.
This is like it's not achievable. This is achievable. It just takes a little bit of time and effort. And I think one thing that you described is time management, like getting it on your calendar, making sure that it has a priority on your calendar, and that goes to time management, you know. But it is achievable. It's not easy. We're not smashing the easy button here,
That's
but
right.
but it
Yeah.
is achievable.
Yeah, by the way, run away from anyone that says they have the easy button for CMMC because it is not just a security tool. It is not just a platform. It is a lot more than that in order to be compliant. So if they're like CMMC in a box or we have the easy button, like, be very,
Run.
very suspicious.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun to continue to talk about this at length because I do think that it showcases to people out there like, listen, it's not just a tool. I'm repeating what you're saying, but it is so important. It's not just a tool, and it is a program, and it's beyond just a checkbox. Um, and having that conversation and sitting down with the team members inside your organization and discussing this, I think really brings things to light. You've been part of those conversations.
But Jason, I do want to underscore though that even though it is not just a tool, the partners that you choose to help you to achieve this are really, really, really important.
Yes.
So, like whether it is your MSP, your MSSP, a compliance consultant, making sure that they really understand what they're talking about and that they don't just they're not just throwing out the CMMC buzzword and then trying to figure it out on the back end. Yeah, we do that. Yeah, we do that. I mean, make sure that you're asking the right questions to really be certain that they're going to be compliant too. Like I have access to environments that have CUI. I have security protection data. My MSP needs to be compliant. You have security protection data. You need to be compliant. And
100%.
we talked to lots and lots of companies. We actually did, I didn't mention this, I actually coach other MSPs and MSSPs how to implement CMMC inside of their own businesses because I can't be the only MSP out here helping the defense industrial base. There needs to be an army of us that are out there doing the right thing. So we did a vendor suitability study. Yeah, we ask the hard questions. There's a reason why you're on our list as a suitable product, and that's because we asked all of the hard questions about what are you doing for your compliance? What does that look like? Where are your people? What do they have access to? And who you choose as a partner in this is really vital for part of your success.
Yeah. I can't stress that enough too. The what you're using those words are being used for a reason. A suitability. It is not just because people say, okay, well, I'm using an EDR. That might you might go find an EDR in the space, but it might not be suitable,
Right.
right? There's other questions to ask around there that either makes it suitable or not, right? And I think that is so important. We with our SIM, right? We host our own SIM inside of Amazon Web Services, inside of the United States, and we protect it in a way with access control and all of the items that when we follow NIST, and we do that in such a way that makes it suitable.
Yes.
Not all SIMs out there in the space are suitable.
Correct.
Right. I too, we have asked and we have gone to other manufacturers and said, do you follow these controls? And as soon as they start saying no, it makes them not suitable.
Hmm.
And I think that is huge in the space. It needs to be known. It needs to be understood. And yeah, I'm so glad that you kind of double clicked and drilled down on that for us.
I'll do one better on that before we
Go
move
ahead.
on. And that
Yeah.
is when you start asking these questions, make sure you're not just asking the question to a salesperson or account manager. Your salespeople will say anything for you to be able to stay with the company or buy their product. And, no offense to salespeople, that is their job. Their job is to sell their product. You want to have a white paper from the company. You want it to be very prominent on the website. In order for vendors to get on our list, I either had to talk to a founder, a security, like a VP of security, or somebody on their compliance team. like a CISO or someone like that in order for us to say, yes, this company is committed to this. God bless account managers and sales reps, but it's a very important decision, and we had to make the right one.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then you wrap into that third-party audits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, we do third-party audits. Meaning that a third party audits us, BitLyft, and this way here, it's not self-attestation. We didn't make the statements up on our own, and then somebody else inside the organization signed it, right? We have third parties that audit us and prove that we're doing what we say we're doing, and I think that that's very important. It keeps out the conflict of interest, right?
It does, and you approach your work differently when you know somebody else is going to check it.
And customers are going to ask for this documentation.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to live up to what you're going to say, right?
That's right.
Yeah. The next kind of thought that I wanted to kind of touch on here is this intersection between cybersecurity best practices and regulatory requirements. In your mind, this is a fun question, so I really want your opinion on this, but when you think of cybersecurity best practices and regulatory requirements, where do you think they align and where do you think they differ?
So I see them as a Venn diagram, right? So we got like best practices, requirements, and right here in the middle, that's where you have an overlap. Depending on the regulation and the control set, the safeguards that you have to put in place, then that Venn diagram might look a little different. But even a security control, like if you just look at the 800-1, there is definitely, and I teach everybody this too, there is a minimum met, right? There's a minimum thing for you to do in order for this control to be met. Now, you can do more sophisticated things that are more secure. That will greatly decrease your risk, but you have to clearly understand what the minimum is. So the minimum might not be awesome. Like, you have to control. One of 800-171 controls is to make sure that your physical access devices are controlled. So that's going to be your keys, fobs, cipher codes, whatever, right? So make sure that those physical access devices, well, cipher code is not a physical access device, but they have to be controlled. Yeah, I know what you mean. So you could just issue keys to everybody as long as you had a list, and then you made sure people gave them back. You know who they were issued to, everything like that. Now, is that as secure as having a centralized system where you're issuing like a fob or an access card and then being able to go in there, turn it off, turn it on? Obviously that's going to be a lot more secure than the keys that somebody could, take to Home Depot and make a copy of. But it still technically meets the control. So if you look at all of them, you could definitely do this is the minimum, and then help an organization to understand the risk with doing that and determine, I've met the control, do I want to accept this other risk, or does it make sense for us to be a little bit more sophisticated? Because if we're a little bit more sophisticated, I might get, massive returns from the security side of things.
Yeah. I think that's very important to showcase that, because what we see a lot in that space is people trying to interpret, the minimum, and they think, well, we checked the box, we did it, we did what it was asking us to do. But you're right on that, is that you have to know that there is a certain level of risk in that minimum.
Yes.
And that if somebody does exploit that minimum, all of a sudden you choosing that minimum versus a more sophisticated way, you also accept that risk that comes with it.
Yeah, because now you have a reportable incident and you have to, go to DibNet and let the DoD know that you were compromised and submit a report to them. And then they've got 90 days to come back, and if they want to investigate that, have access to your system, see your logs, even up to taking the equipment. Yeah, so this doesn't happen very often, but I had a friend that worked on back in the day. He worked as a contractor on a military base in the IT department, and they had a compromise. The CIO department walked right in, unplugged the server, and walked out with the server to do their own forensic analysis. In DFAR 7012, the government reserves that right. So if that happened to you, and you reported it because you have to, and they're like, you know what, we want to come in and we want to grab that server and that was compromised, it got ransomware on it, and we want to take it with us. They have a right to do that. And then what do you do when you don't have your server? I mean, like, you just got it back up. You just click, you restored everything, and then DoD shows up and takes it. That, again, that doesn't happen often, but it could. So you have
But
to
it
think
could.
about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I really hope that this is helping people. One of the things that I want to kind of touch on here is we're starting to kind of think about maybe wrapping up today's session, and I hope you've had fun, and I hope you come back and do another session with me again sometime in the future. I know your schedule's super busy, but I want to kind of touch on what are some of the biggest lessons from companies as you've navigated compliance and security challenges, you know, sharing with people that are listening. What are some of those biggest ways that you kind of navigated through there?
The biggest thing for me has been my network. So I'm a voracious learner, and I love CMMC. I love learning about compliance because I like a structured approach to understand, to be able to measure my risk, to be able to have a meter of how well we're doing, not just like Leia's best practices for security, but smart people that created controls. I've taken, my CCP, my CMMC certified CMMC professional, certified CMMC assessor class, because I just learn all the time. So, but I can't know everything. The body of knowledge in this thing is so wide and vast. So I have lots of friends, like the people who have very specific, deep knowledge in different areas. So if I have a question, I can call them. And you need like your go-to people. So if you're just trying to fly this alone and only have, like, if I would tell you the minimum, if you're not going to get a consultant to be able to help you with this, please send somebody on your team to the CCP class so they at least have that knowledge internally, so you have somebody with that knowledge. Make friends with the people on LinkedIn that really know what they're talking about. Make friends with me. I'm on LinkedIn. There's only one of me. There's only one Leia Shilobod.
That's good and bad, right? It's bad because we want more of you out in the space, but you're only one person.
Yeah, but it's that community. And what we found is that this ecosystem, I don't like that word, but community, we all really, like, we care. We just want everybody to get the right solutions. We want everyone to be secure and compliant. We want people to pass their assessments. Like, those are the people you got to get yourself plugged in with, because they're going to make sure that you feel supported, that you get the right information, that you're not going to throw tens of thousands or more away on wrong solutions, bad consulting, unsuitable MSP. They'll point you in the right direction.
Yeah, I don't disagree a bit. Also, I steer away from the word ecosystem. It makes me feel like it's, but
Yeah.
we're people, we're a community. And that is one thing that I have loved about the CMMC community is for the most part, there's a lot of folks in it that are like you and I, wanting to share, that we're not holding all this information tight to the vest and not wanting to share it. It seems like a community of sharing. It seems like a community of like, let's all help each other achieve this. We all want to be better at cybersecurity, securing these organizations, and just achieving. I mean, we get up every day and go to work to help each other out, you
Yes.
know? And I think that's what this community really aspires to have inside of it. You go to conferences and it just makes me happy, to go to conferences and see that, you
Yes.
know?
Yes, I agree.
But, so in sort of like final thoughts here, I know we touched on a lot of practical advice for organizations today, but is there something that you just don't feel like maybe we touched on and that would be a practical advice for preparing, somebody for CMMC?
We covered
We,
a
we've
lot of
covered a
things.
lot. So if there's nothing, there's nothing, but if there's something that you think that like just stands out, you know,
Yeah, again, like, make sure that you have a go-to person or go-to people that have really deep knowledge in this area, so you get the right information the first time, and don't have to go back and do lots of rework. I can't tell you how much, Jason, it hurts my heart when contractors come to me after having gotten burnt because they were with either some fly-by-night person that was truly just in it for the cash,
yeah,
or somebody who really thought they knew what they were doing and clearly they did not. Like I'm a small business owner myself, so when I see another small business spending so much money, like it literally hurts my heart to see that. It's expensive. It takes a lot of effort and time. So get linked up with the right people. And like Jason said, the community is so welcoming and so friendly. So make friends so you have good resources and you do things right the first time.
Yeah, that's awesome. I agree with you. I think sometimes those folks that are sort of it brings me back to what my mom used to always say, one rotten apple in the basket will rot the whole basket, you know? And so I'd be careful. Make sure that you're selecting the right company. Make sure that they truly have a heart in it. Make sure they're deep in their knowledge. Um, one thing that we didn't talk about today, but which is like the shared responsibility matrix.
Mm.
Um, it's just, it shows, if you go to an organization that already has their shared responsibility matrix pre-set up and they're ready to talk about it with you as a client and sort of talk through that with you, they already have a depth of knowledge, right? You're not picking out somebody brand new. If you say shared responsibility matrix and they look at you and they don't have a response right away, I'd probably run away from that individual, because they're not ready to have the conversation. They're sort of that fly by night.
I agree. But remember, Jason, the DoD just changed it to Customer Responsibility Matrix so they could confuse us by having another acronym for CRM that doesn't mean
CRM.
Customer Relationship Manager now. It also means Customer Responsibility Matrix. God bless them. We were calling it
Thank you for the correction.
we were calling it Shared Responsibility Matrix for years.
Yeah.
I still say it because
Yeah. No, you're right. I want to make sure that this is up to date, honest, and truthful information. So it is now a customer responsibility matrix. I'm corrected there. So yeah, you see why it's so important to stay plugged in to the network
yeah.
is you have to stay up to date. Well, one final question for you. I wanted to ask you, since you've read the book, since you stay in tune with the information. So now take a moment and share with me your thoughts on future. What do you think the next 6 months, 12 months is going to look like? Maybe 18 months as you're walking this out with other clients. Anything to share with us is about the future of CMMC?
So the first companies are going through their the first official CMMC assessments. We had the joint surveillance assessments before, but those were not CMMC assessments. They still get their certificate, but we're having that right now. So we're going to have a lot of learning and a lot of feedback from what certification assessments look like. We're going to know much better how to properly prepare and prep for that. So that doesn't just mean the documentation, that means the people that the assessors are going to talk to, making sure that they know the right kinds of things to say to bring confidence that they've really done the right thing. And then what the other thing we're going to see is those organizations who have kind of sat up and said, CMMC is a thing and I need to do it now. So I have actually had requests myself over the last 6 weeks for organizations to ask to fast track their compliance. And it takes 12 to, on the high end, 24 months, depending on what you got, to implement a program and do all your remediation. So if you show up and you want it in 6 months, I can tell you that it is achievable, but it's incredibly expensive because you know that old adage, you can do it fast, cheap, or right, and you can only pick two. So guess which one is going to go up? Yeah.
Well, that's great. I super appreciate your time that you spent with us today and sharing your thoughts. Again, I'd love to have you back on the show at some point in the future and continue to talk about this as this continues to unravel and we get more and new acronyms. And it's what we live for.
I'd love to. So we will go through a couple of assessments this year, including our own. And I'd love to come back and talk to everybody about what that looks like so that we can pass on those learnings to the community.
That'd be awesome. And good luck to you at the upcoming conferences. I know that you've got the next 4 weeks booked with CMMC related conferences. And so good luck there. And yeah, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you so much, Jason.